Short week, President's Day yesterday. Hope you all had a good time this weekend, and President's Day yesterday. And I have to admit, I had a great weekend. I was with my grandchildren, at least 3 of my grandchildren. And any of you who are grandparents, and I look out and I see potentially a lot of grandparents out there, you know how much fun it is to be with grandkids. And it's their parents' problem, it's not my problem. I just have a great time with them. So we hiked through the woods and found springs and water holes, and it's not my problem if they get wet. They enjoyed it. And so it was a good weekend. But it's good to be back here and to have this facility. We appreciate Northfield Township, and we appreciate the supervisor willing to step in and be the moderator today. Marlene, I'm giving you a little time there to go through all those cards. You have plenty of them, and we're glad that there are questions and concerns that we can address in this short hour that we have to deal with. A couple key issues that are, or I guess 3 we could mention, that are on the docket for consideration and also outcome that we're glad to see. First happened back in December, and that was the Tax Cut Jobs Act, a proposal that was negotiated for the past almost 5 years and finally came to fruition. There's question whether or not it would actually work, and thankfully it has already. Some very significant positive impact, and we tell people every Friday, make sure you check the check. Check your check, and one thing that's good for those that are getting paychecks, they see their withholding is now different. It's less, and so it means more income that they take home as opposed to going into the federal government's coffers. Then the number of, it's approaching 400 separate businesses and corporations that have announced. We know that there are others that haven't announced yet, but they have announced either bonuses or pay increases or ups in starting wages, increased expansion of facilities, plans for bringing components back from overseas or from foreign countries. Here in this district, we're excited about FCA Chrysler with their Dodge trucks, the plan of bringing back the plant here to Michigan with 2,500 employee increase. That's a good thing. That all speaks to what we really want to do when we do legislation that returns control back, for whatever it is, back to the people themselves. So that was completed, and we're seeing the impact of that now. In getting the spending proposals through, it's been a difficult challenge of trying to get the priorities established and take care of the key responsibilities that the federal government has. Sadly, we've taken on more responsibilities than were originally defined for us, but to get those key responsibilities we have, like military funding, making sure we have defense capabilities that are there and aren't falling away from us, and we don't have planes falling out of the sky and individual military partners being killed or maimed, injured, etc. Those are things that we need, and we're thankful that we got that done with a bipartisan vote just a week and a half ago. DACA is on the map right now. The Senate, if you've read, tried 4 different amendment proposals last week, none of which got the majority needed to get them up for a bill to go forward. The House has a plan that looks very close to having the necessary votes to get it up for a vote and get it passed before the March 4th deadline that the President has given us to come up with a solution to DACA. That solution, the Good Lad bill, I've co-sponsored myself, isn't perfect, but it's come a long way. And the one thing it does do is make sure that those 700,000 individuals who came here through no fault of their own, really no responsibility of their own, are given a path for legal involvement in this country, and then ultimately keep their nose clean, follow the rules, be American in every way, shape, or form. Then they will have an opportunity for citizenship after that time. But that'll probably be 10 years down the road with 3-year application renewals that make sure that we know where they are, they know where they are, and in the system they're still going along as they ought to and progressing. Along that line, in the bill, there's also funding for securing our borders. making sure that's done. The American people said that very strongly in this last election. They wanted our border secured, and that will be there as well. There'll also be the ending of chain migration and diversity visas, none of which were ever part of our immigration system before. And we want to promote an immigration system that works as it has throughout the decades and decades that citizens have come, or immigrants have come to this country in order to participate in the American dream and ultimately become citizens like my grandparents and father, who came here only desiring to have the opportunity to be Americans. And then finally, the issue that will come up very strongly when we get back in Congress, and certainly delighted to hear any ideas that you have today, and that's why we have these town hall meetings, is on the issue of what took place in Florida last week, sadly, when evil face was shown very clearly. And 18 lives were taken, innocent lives were taken. Good many other lives were impacted very seriously medically or emotionally. And we think of the families, etc., who have been impacted forever because of this senseless act of violence that goes on. There has to be a solution to that. It's not a single-pronged solution. It's multi-pronged. But there has to be, and ultimately, minds have to come together. And as we go on, and Marlene, I'm going to turn to you very quickly here because we want to get to the questions and comments. But we are Americans. The only way that America, I believe, can ever be defeated or diminished is by being divided. I was a junior higher when Nikita Khrushchev banged his shoe on the table of the United Nations and very clearly said that they would take us from within. And the only way that can happen is by the division within our citizens. Not division of ideas, but a division that flows from having ideas, but then being in disagreement with each other to the point that we divide ourselves as Americans. The beauty of this country is we can have diverse ideas and positions, and we can debate them strongly. That's a good thing. But in the end, we want to come together as Americans. So thank you as Americans for coming together today here, and let's go on, Marlene. I'm going to let you lead us into the questions.
All right. There's quite a few questions about the national debt, and they're all kind of nuanced, but we have Sheila from Chelsea asking about the massive amount of money that is being added to the national debt. David from Dexter saying, why can't Congress pass a balanced budget? Ryan from Dexter saying that we were promised fiscal responsibility and he's not seeing that. Lori from Whitmore Lake said we voted for a tax bill that reduces the federal revenue over $1 trillion in the next decade, supposing to jolt our economy. And she's wondering about the research associated with that. And are these too many things associated?
Well, let me jump in on those. Number one,
they're all very related.
Ryan from Dexter, that wasn't my question.
It wasn't? Let me find Ryan from Dexter. Okay. Go ahead.
It's a concern, but it wasn't my question.
Okay, go ahead.
Number one, I'm a co-sponsor of the balanced budget amendment. It takes working together within both parties and within the parties to get something up for a vote. At this point in time, there are a lot of people talking about a balanced budget amendment, but too few people willing to co-sponsor it, and less people willing to have it up for a vote. I'd encourage people to continue asking your members of Congress and senators, asking your friends and neighbors and family members who live in other districts as well to contact their member of Congress and ask for a balanced budget. I've co-sponsored the balanced budget amendment. Let me say that again in case you missed it. I co-sponsored the balanced budget amendment, and we want to see that effective someday. We have that in state legislature. When it was state legislature, we had a balanced budget requirement. You can tinker with how it actually comes out, but we stay closer to balance by having it.
Why did you vote for the tax cut?
So on answering the questions that were asked here, the tax, the question about the spending, it's interesting that there are people now talking about an alleged, and again, CBO scores the cost of any bill, any item, statically, not dynamically, not the impact of economic growth that can come as a result of using policies that do always make a difference, whether it was John F. Kennedy in the 60s, whether it was Ronald Reagan, whether it was Bill Clinton, all of those tax cuts brought up the revenue to the federal government. The problem was, except with Kennedy and that Congress, every Congress since that time spent the money that came, as opposed to giving the impact to the economy and to individuals.
It did work.
So, bottom line, it works. Secondly,
in 2008, you lost your job, and so did I. Everybody in this room.
In this format, I have an hour. It's your hour. We can either do it by answering the questions, or we can do it shouting over, and I'm not going to shout over.
Well, she's going to mischaracterize the question. My question was...
She'll go back to the question. Now, going back to the...
Did not deliver what they were promised.
Excuse me. She will get back to your question.
Okay.
Going back to the economy, it's interesting, during the preceding administration, 8 years, $10 trillion of debt was added. $10 trillion, that was more than the entire debt that the last administration came in. And where were the voices at that time from some of you who are now worried about 1.5 trillion, that in fact won't be 1.5 trillion.
Target to do more than
So
what
the
was done in the
1.5
last
trillion
administration.
is not going to take place because of the growth that'll already is taking place.
Just like in
economy.
2008, right?
So the next question that was in there, go back to Brian so we can get.
You're not answering any of the questions. Why are we even doing this?
Ryan's question, after he stated that the wholesale destruction of the economy, massive debt and bailouts, why should we believe the tax cuts passed last year will be any different? And that's related to research, I would think. But
Bush tax
that's your
cuts.
question.
That were
The Bush tax
the
worked.
same promises.
The Bush tax cuts worked very well.
That's why
Had the longest sustained
That's why
economy.
the economy went down.
The Reagan tax cuts worked very
No,
well.
they did not. They increased the
The
debt.
problem,
Let's talk about who they're working for and who
They
they're
increased
not.
the debt, and that's why Bush the next time had to up the taxes again, even though he said no more taxes.
They weren't
It's what
perceived
Reagan
as-
left Bush that
So
caused the
what I'm
problem.
hearing is saying it worked and didn't work. Where's the research that shows
Thank
it
you.
works? Where's the research that
Yes.
says this works?
you have to look at the solid research entities like Heritage Foundation.
That's middle of the road research, please. Middle of the road.
Give us a site. and
How,
we'll
like
look it up.
the question was how
Go to American Enterprise Institute, check that out.
Another
Go to Brookings Institute, you can check that out. Hudson Institute, you can check that out.
My question is,
The
how
issue,
is this
the
different
issue
than
was
last time?
the issue is the spending that comes in Congress. Tax cuts work.
My question.
The spending is what doesn't work.
Okay, they work to do what?
So let's go on to the next question. We're definitely, folks, as I said, there will be disagreement. But we can say for a fact that 8 years under the last administration, $10 trillion of debt,
And what are you
reduction
on
in the
target to
security
do?
of this country, and the fact that all of the stuff that seems to be of interest to people now could have been done back then and wasn't done.
To protect us from the recession.
Because you guys wouldn't vote for it.
Next question.
Next question is associated with Social Security. How will the government continue to fund my Social Security and Medicare with the large deficits in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
Congressman,
The only,
can I add on to that?
is that your question?
No, it's not.
No, it's not your question. They're gonna go
That
on.
was Robin from Dexter. Lori
We're
from
going to
Whitmore
take
Lake.
the questions of people who
Would you
ask.
support raising the cap?
The,
on Social Security?
the issue with Social Security is making sure that we have an economy that has people working. You know how Social Security is paid for? I'm on